Hi, this is Per from Connector. I'm here today to talk about remarketing and remarketing in a content text of whether or not you need analytics. Everybody will tell you, and you've probably heard that a million times, you need analytics to make data-driven decisions. If you don't have data, then you drive your car blindfoldedly and so on. And that's true, but to some extent when you come to remarketing, maybe not so true. And this is what this video is about today. Before we come to that part, we have to start with your business and why you do remarketing in the first place and what remarketing actually is, just so that we know what we're talking about and we agree upon everything like that. Remarketing is the concept of making your users coming back to your website after they visited you once. And the overall idea is that it's very unlikely that you can persuade a user that haven't visited your website or your brand before to become a customer in one take. They need to know you, they need to know your brand, they need to understand your product and so on. So you would have a funnel kind of approach towards your customers where you first interact with them and then you want them to come back, and then eventually they would build up trust with you and buy your product and so on. So you need some dynamics and mechanisms that can drive your users back to your website in a way that ends up making them buy the products or services that you are selling. So that's the whole idea about remarketing. And that is actually also why analytics is not so important as you might think when it comes to remarketing, because everything has to do with your product and how you're going to sell it to your customers. And that's actually the important part. The second most important part is which channels do you use, and then you would use analytics as the last step to see if your decisions is working or not. But the two first elements, your customers and the relationship you have with them, and the channels are actually the important ones. And that has more to do with common sense than analytics. Let me explain a bit what I mean about this. First of all, you and your products. We have worked with many different companies. Some have like TV shop products that you don't really look for. They show you this really good basket to do cleaning up or whatever it is, and the idea is that it's a one-take sale. You see it, you get convinced, and then you buy it. That's one end of the scale, 100% impulse buying. The other end of the scale is another example is from another company that we work with. They sell holiday houses in France. It takes a year on average from the moment that a family gets interested in the concept of having a house in the southern part of France until they actually make a buying decision. So they have a year where they need to target that customer. And of course, they doesn't spend the whole year looking for houses in France. They do it on a sort of on and off basis, but they come more and more into the idea, and then eventually they would buy. So the sales funnels for those two products are very differently. And that's what I mean by you need to understand your customers and the relationship you have with them first. What kind of product or service are you selling to them, and what would be a realistic way in for a company or for a person who hasn't had any interaction with you? Do you need them to visit your website 3 times? What do you need them to do first? Do they need to understand your brand, your product portfolio, the features of your product and so on? What's the important part to get them motivated to come back? And when they come back, do you then need to give them more detailed information and so on? And then eventually, what do you need to do to push for the sales? That has not to do with analytics. That has to do with understanding how you want to sell your product and doing it the best way possible and having the content that support that sales process that I just mentioned. And those processes is very differently. And you don't need remarketing analytics to do that. It has to do with common sense and the idea about how many touch points do I need in my funnel before I can expect people to buy, and how long time would that funnel be. Is it like you're trying to sell a car, maybe take 2 months or shorter, or is it like a pretty intense buying circle because it's close to Christmas and you want to make sure people buy your product within a given time frame and so on? All this has to do with your product and your business and how you approach your customers. So that is step 1. And once you have outlined that, and all of this you probably know already, You don't need data or remarketing for that part. Then you have to select the channels that you want to do remarketing on. And the channels, they have different, what you could say, features, depending on how you want to use them in the sales funnels. We used to split them up into what we call awareness channels and sales channels. And awareness channels are the ones where you build awareness and relationship with your customers, but don't expect to sell from them because they're not very good at it. They're good at the first part, awareness and so on. Sales channels are the ones you use when you're ready to make the sale to the customer, or actually the customer is ready to buy from you. You would use different kinds of channels for that purpose. And this is not to do with opinion, this has to do with the data. We get a lot of data that we talk to our customers about, and there's a very clear picture of which channels are good for creating awareness and which channels are very good for selling. The awareness channels are, not very surprisingly, Instagram and Twitter, those kinds of channels that is very impulse oriented, and actually you could call them browsing channels. Everything where you go in and browse, you look around and so on, but you stay within the environment or the channel's domain, if you can say that. So once you're in Instagram, it's actually very difficult to persuade people to move from Instagram over to another channel, because Instagram works very well, browsing around, you look at stuff and you get inspired and so on, but you don't really make a buying decision that you take from Instagram and then you go over and end up in the shopping basket. We don't see that in our data, it doesn't happen. Doesn't mean that Instagram is bad, it just means that you should use it for the first part in the creating awareness. Forget about sales. Twitter, exactly the same. You could say Twitter is just Instagram with text, basically. Of course, different audiences and so on, but it's the same dynamics. Don't expect sales from Twitter and so on. The channels that you can use to actually create sales, the best ones is direct and SEO, and then Google AdWords. And if you are a B2B customer or B2B company, then LinkedIn could work for you as well. And Bing, of course, as a small fraction of what Google is. And the reason those channels work well in terms of sales is we can see that these are the channels where people are more motivated to go in and do the actual sales on your website, because they're not browsing oriented. They're more, people are more in a investigating mode when they use those, so they're more open for actually doing the sales. So those channels work well for this. Again, this has not to do with analytics, this has to do with common sense. Where are you in the sales funnel part? Do you need to create awareness, or are you at a point where you actually want to push for sales? That will determine your sales channel strategy. And then the last part, of course, I said that you can come a long way without analytics, and that's true. But everything that I just mentioned here, of course, you would like to monitor. So you can see if you are a B2B company and you have selected LinkedIn, then you would like to follow up and then monitor that quite closely, because LinkedIn can be a very efficient channel, but everybody knows that it's also an extremely expensive channel to use. So you want to make sure that your return on investment on your marketing efforts there are met, and the same goes for the other channels. So you want to make sure that you actually get what you expect from them, and that of course requires that you measure it and you use analytics for that part. But that's only the last step of what you're doing. Everything else that I mentioned are the really important ones. Your thoughts about which kind of company am I, what kind of products do I sell, that's the most important part. That would sort of determine the sales channels that I mentioned before. Which one should I use where? Should I use one or two, or just focus on one? You would know that better. And then the time and the length, the time funnel that you look into. Is it 2 days, 3 days, or do we look into interaction, so that people need to interact with your website 3 or 4 times before they're ready to push for sales and so on? Again, that has more to do with business than analytics. Of course, you can get numbers that support your ideas and so on, but that's just a verification. It doesn't drive your business decisions. It's just verify them and then maybe help to adjust a little bit. So again, Most of it has actually to do with understanding your customer, your brand, and how your channels work. And then icing on the cake is to use analytics to monitor if it goes as expected and to see if your return on investment on the marketing channels is well put out. We have written a blog about this topic that you can go into and read on our website, and there are similar video casts like this where we go through other topics like should I use Facebook and analytics, should I use Instagram analytics, and so on, so you have an idea about how the different channels work and what you should look into as a minimum when you use the channels, because you should always use analytics, but it's not the key business driver. It's something that you use to verify what you're doing. I hope it makes sense, and that's it. Talk to you soon, and see you later. Bye.